Welcome back, y'all. Dr. Nicole Truesdale here. As always, I'm your host and guide for this podcast, Abolitionist Dreamscape. So welcome. All right, y'all. It's episode 20, episode 20. I'm here, you're here, and we're here together. And this is also the end of my season 2. Now, don't worry, there will be a season 3. I've already got some ideas for it. I'm going to take the rest of the summer, which is July and August, to work through the production and start to record. And I will be back in the fall for season 3. So make sure you're still subscribing. I got 2 full seasons that I've already laid out. So if you are new to this podcast, just know there's a whole lot there to still engage with. And if you've been following me along, just know that I have more content that is exclusive to my Patreon. So please go to my Patreon, which is also called Abolitionist Dreamscapes, to support a new type of education and really be able to get more in depth with me into all kinds of things, from the Colonial Project, y'all, to spirit, to strategically dreaming. And a lot of the work that I do and that I'm going to be focusing more on going forward is this idea of dreaming. How do we strategically dream so that we know that not only can we only save ourselves, but it is through our imaginations, it is through taking back our rest, it is through believing our reality and having all of that come together that allows us to believe our humanity, start to center that so that we can figure out what futures look like in which we can actually live instead of just surviving and barely doing that. So when the structures around us crumble and fall as they are right now, in the US, we're seeing it. It's been coming on. Then those who wanted to kind of put their head in the sand, because there was always this idea that it will only happen in the future. Well, SCOTUS is letting us knowing it is happening right now in the present. So again, if we can only say ourselves, it is the time we have to dream, strategically dream, so that we understand what not to reproduce by understanding what we are attached to in these kind of messed up structures, allowing ourselves to let it go and dreaming of something new. So if you want to learn more with me, if you want to work with me one-on-one, check out my Patreon, but also check out my website, drnicoletruesdale.com, in which there's a number of different services that I offer, from coaching to strategizing to consulting. And if you're ever interested in inquiring for a speaker or for me to facilitate small groups, especially leadership groups, please reach out to me as well, drnicoletruesdale@gmail.com, okay? So, but this episode, y'all, I want to kind of do a recap. I want to recap and talk through what this season has taught me. And it's funny because I've been trying to record this episode for a couple of times already. I've recorded 2 different versions of this, did not like either one, felt like I was rambling. So I gave myself a minute and came back on and said, I'm just going to talk through kind of what this season 2 has taught me. And this is because season 2 for me has been about the crossroads. If you joined me for episode 11, when I opened up the season talking with the amazing Tracy D. Hall, we were talking about the crossroads of our lives and our relationship to our ancestors, to the practice of hoodoo, which is a land-based practice for African American folks who come from the South. If your lineage practice that. And in that conversation, right, I was really laying the groundwork. I didn't realize it at the time, for me making sense of what my life was about to come in my life this year. And it's because astrologically, I'm in the midst of some pretty gnarly transits. And if you actually watch the episode with me and Laura Chung, actually season 1, I believe it was in episode 9 or so, we talked, and then we came back together again, episode 18. In that episode, we talked about astrological middle age, because both of us are 42, and engaging in these kind of tense transits that the outer planets enact that really asks us between the ages of 36 and 45 to get real with our life, to really ask ourselves, what does it mean to live if we've already had all these experiences of life and we sit at the crossroads of the life we are at? What roads are we really wanting to go down to, and what roads need to close? And so this is what we call the Uranus opposition, along with the Neptune and the Pluto squares. And for me, this is why I always say that this is when the outer planets get very personal, because the outer planets are generational planets, right? They tell us more about large groups of people versus just you individually. But if you work with the outer planets in the astrology chart, the planets, you will have placements in Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which means that there is a personalization or an intimate kind of conversation that we will have with these outer planet energies. And this is the astrological middle age, which I'm in. So I got my Uranus opposition right now. I've also got transiting Pluto directly on my South Node in Aquarius in my fourth house. And then I've got the transiting South Node in Libra directly on my natal Saturn, Jupiter, and eventually Venus, since they're all in a tight conjunction in my 12th house in Libra. So basically everything in my goddamn life is breaking, right? And I didn't think much more could break. You know, if you followed me from this first episode of season 1, and if you follow me on my socials, you know that I broke my life, right? I came out later in life as lesbian to myself and then everybody else. Got divorced. I had left my career in higher ed before I figured out that I was gay. So I was also going off on my own to try to figure out what it means to not just work for myself, but live for myself, because work was killing me. I was a workaholic. I had poured all of my worth and all of my knowing and all of my love into institutions that can never love you back. And when I got my ass handed to me in that lack of love, I really had to ask myself if this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, or was it time for me to pivot, for me to literally step out on faith for myself. But shit, to step out on faith for yourself, y'all, you got to find yourself. You know, and so the last couple of years has been a lot of breaking, leaving things, leaving relationships, leaving concepts, leaving contracts, like of all sorts, just to be with myself. And so I thought, okay, great. This year, can't shit else break, I don't think. So now it's time to kind of create and build. And this is where the crossroads hit me hard. And really, especially after talking with Tracy, is when the reality of sitting at the crossroads came to more and more of my present. Because it's like everything that I was trying to attempt to do slowed down until it eventually had a fucking halting stop in April, in which my money was drying up, my prospects were drying up, and I felt like I was gonna have another goddamn mental breakdown. Honestly, figuring out like what was I doing wrong. I kept asking myself, what the fuck am I doing wrong? I thought that if I was true to myself, then things would not be so goddamn hard. I wasn't expecting roses and sunshine, but I was expecting a bit more ease because I was choosing me. This is what the crossroads would do. It asks you to really sit with you and dig into what does it really mean though to choose you. Because what I was still doing was trying to say that I wanted a new life, but doing shit the old way, right? Those two things don't work really well. You can't say you want a new life, you want to do things new, but then when you're attempting to do things new, you're only doing them the ways you used to do. So for me, that meant I was still, even though I know I don't work well in institutions, even though I know when I'm trying to just build, if I'm building in somebody else's house, I will actually accidentally break something in that house, because that's the only way that a lot of the stuff that I work builds. I can't create in a space that can't hold it. So we have to kind of do some demolition to then rebuild again on more solid ground. And that's why people hired me. I was always very honest about that. That's how I work. I mean, shit, Uranus sits on my ascendant, my Scorpio rising at 23 degrees, and Uranus sits at 26 degrees Scorpio, right on my Lilith as well at 26 degrees. I don't know how not to break shit, right? Even when I don't want to be seen, my 6'3" ass will somehow be seen, right? And so that's the energy I work with. And so if I carry the energy of disruption, then I have to be comfortable with disrupting, including myself. See, this is the Uranus opposition, because Uranus is now in Taurus. Taurus rules my seventh house of one-on-one relationships. Taurus is also Venus ruled. So my seventh house, or if you're a Scorpio rising and you work with whole signs astrology, our seventh house is ruled by Venus. So we are ruled, our one-on-one relationships are literally ruled through the planet that rules love. And then my Venus itself is in Libra, the other sign that Venus likes to be in, and that rules my 12th house. So Venus is in Libra, my 12th. Taurus sits on my 7th, and that's where Uranus is transitioning right now. Motherfucker, all my goddamn relationships are going through some changes, right? Good, bad, and different at the end of the day. But what it's forcing me to do is I'm having to get really comfortable in my own energy so that I am attracting people in my life, whether it be platonic, romantic, business wise, any kind of contracts in which my disruptive energy is something that they can also hold, right? So the last couple of months, really contracts, really has been a lot of business stuff, business and love, but a lot of business as a businesswoman have had to be really, really evaluated because I cannot be beholden to institutions, even though I'm working with institutions. It's this goddamn catch 22. So I'm like looking, honestly, I'm like looking at my ancestors, my spirits, myself. I'm like, what the fuck do I do? Right. And then I kept hearing, Nick, you can't do, you can't do new shit old ways. So what do you need to let go of? What do you need to allow yourself to give up so that you can really start to create and do things differently? And I was like, well, I don't really know what that means, y'all. Like, I'm literally having these kind of contemplations as I'm also working with some clients who themselves are going through some gnarly things at their own work, right? Well, the last couple of weeks, it really has started to hit me that I have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I got to get comfortable doing things new, which means that I got to be okay not knowing. I got to be okay exploring. I got to be okay opening up and telling people this is what I need. This is what I cannot tolerate. And this is where I want to go. So this is where I have to dream. And it's really interesting because I've been talking about and teaching about dreaming for years. When I was in higher ed, a lot of the things I would do when I would work with faculty and administrators to get them to kind of move beyond these narrow-minded ways of engaging with populations at the margins. We called it asset-based approaches to working with populations. Some people call it decolonial work, right? What I really wanted them to do is to dream because there was a really hard for a lot of academics to move beyond the confines of the logics that we are all kind of trained to buy into. These are our methodologies, right? We are disciplined into our disciplines. And in that disciplining, we can really remove ourselves from our humanity in favor of the constant logicking of the mind. But we are human beings, right? So in order for us to really utilize all of this logic and knowledge, we have to goddamn create and imagine. But you can only create and imagine if you are rested and allow your mind to wander. But in a production cycle, in a publish and perish kind of industry, your rest is stolen and it is actually seen as somehow not as rigorous if you are not constantly going and producing, right? So the ability to dream was something that I would try to bring in. And literally, when I did this at National Women's Studies Association, NWSA, a while ago, might be 8 years now, they invited me and my colleagues to do this keynote for chairs and directors of women's centers. And I asked the question, when's the last time you dreamed? And women, they started laughing at me. They're like, what do you mean? And it's like, y'all want to have decolonial this and anti-racist that, but none of that is possible until you can actually conjure it. When is the last time you dreamed? Right? And that kept coming back in my mind these last 2 months as things started to get really tight and tense. And again, contracts not following through, shit just going left. Like Uranus really is chaotic energy. Uranus is sudden change. It's electricity. It's genius. It's the higher octave of Mercury. Mercury being ruled by Gemini and Virgo, air and the body, air and earth, right? Always remember, Virgo is a sign that tends to have stomach issues because it is the embodiment of the Mercury. It is the body of Mercury, whereas Gemini is the mind. But since we are so mind focused in this society, right? Since we have to be disassociated, disconnected, so that we learn to commodify our own bodies, therefore become okay commodifying others through these extractive systems, right? We don't realize that that is how we digest our oppressor, digest power, and then reproduce it, even as we're saying we're trying to fight against it, right? It's this catch 22. Again, you can't do new shit using the old same ways. It was constantly this theme coming to me these past few months with this Uranus opposition, right? And so that's when it hit me. I have to start to dream again, like really dream, allow myself to go into the locations that essentially scare me, but they scare me not because I don't think they are possible. They scare me because I think it is possible. This is some cliche, raggedy shit, right? And realize that it was scaring me because it is possible. And for me, what is possible is creating through this kind of production company of making abolitionist dreamscapes a space that Black queer stories are centered, and we archive that shit and we tell those stories and we create the templates. Because for me, dreaming is queer. You have to queer your sense of sight, of sound, of taste, of everything, of attraction. And I'm not even talking sexual. I'm just talking, what are you attracted to and why? Right? When you look at yourself in the mirror, do you see something and somebody who is attractive because it is you? Not because you have bought into and you can put on the script of what society tells you based upon your identities is how you should be. Can you see yourself, right? Can you literally queer your lens so that you can open up the kaleidoscope of possibilities and let those motherfuckers run wild? And so I'm realizing I had to come out. Like I had to come out. I had to come out of the closet for me because I was hiding so much of myself from me. But in this coming out process, it's much more than just liking women and enjoying sex with women and wanting to be with a woman. It's about coming out and coming into my own sense of self, letting that queerness really shine, letting that Uranus energy really do what it needs to do, disrupt, so that one is sitting in your own genius, because we all have our own genius. Don't think about genius just as being some big intellectual. That's the way we are taught it is. But even what is considered genius in society is heavily dependent upon structure. Fucking Elon Musk considered a damn genius. If that man's a genius, then I don't know what the hell, most of us are then, right? So if we can't do new shit using old ways, right, then what are the new tools? We love a good quote. And for years, I have engaged with Audre Lorde's Master's Tools, Master's House in all kinds of ways. And at one point in my career, and I wrote about this actually, I said, I agree, the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house, but the tools in the hands of those never imagined to have them will repurpose them in different ways. That was my way of trying to grapple with this idea of working inside an institution that doesn't like you while trying to disrupt it and shift it, right? This is kind of the undercommons that Harney and Moten talk about, or the third university is possible with Lepaperson when he talks about like the cyborg and going in and getting yourself dirty, but understanding that's part of the work, right? So that's what I was trying to do. Shit didn't work too well because you have to also have other people who are committed to that kind of long game. And I got my ass handed to me at Brown when I realized that I thought what I assumed that we all had as common ground was not the actuality. So realizing that trying to work within the house is always going to be a trap at the end of the day because the house does win. The house knows how to win because they built that motherfucking house, right? If I don't want to try to repurpose those tools in that house because the tools really still are theirs, then what happens if I drop them? What happens if we drop the master's tools? What happens if we realize that them tools not only are part of our subjugation, but the tools require us to pick them up because the master don't even know how to fucking use them, but the master knows how to commodify others to use it for its own end game, right? So we can't do new shit using the old ways. So this is where I've been making a lot of pivots, making a lot of pivots in my business, making a lot of pivots in kind of what interests me and what I want to do. And so I was saying earlier, it's a storytelling. It's becoming the storyteller. I was an anthropologist, and I went to anthropology because I loved stories. I wanted to not only understand what it meant to be human, but I wanted to hear the stories of other humans. I wanted to understand how other people lived, because for me, I did not feel like I was living, even as a teenager. Like I felt confined in my home. I felt confined in those schools. I felt confined in my neighborhood. I wanted to break free. And literally being so kind of big in my body, I always felt like I had to shrink. So for me, the ability to travel, the ability to get out there, especially not coming from some kind of, fancy background or a rich background, I was able to do that through education, right? So anthropology became the mechanism and vehicle to help me explore. But in doing all of that, I was still within the master's confines. I was in its discipline. I was in a discipline that literally helped construct the colonial project, for fuck's sakes. So there's a way that in removing myself from that project, I have to also take the lesson, but really transmute that pain and understand that if I want to do new shit, I can't do it the old way. So the new way then means I got to dream. And so in that dreaming, this is where my season 3 is coming in, y'all, because I am really excited. I want to focus on stories. So I am working with a few people. This season, I did a lot of interviews, and I really like that. I like talking with people. It makes it interesting. You're not just listening to me. I learn some things. You learn some things, and then it's also building for me kind of my ecosystem. I really believe in working with others. I do believe in community, but I believe in intentional community, and I believe in community based upon us getting to know one another and trusting each other, because we do what we say, and we say what we do. So that takes time, right? And I'm not somebody that believes that just because we're Black and queer, we're automatically going to be like, going to be kind of kindred spirits. I want to move beyond the identities and get to somebody's humanity, and the same with me. So we're talking with people and bringing folks back on is for me also modeling my own way of working with folks and building relationships. And so season 3 is going to be talking about stories. I want to talk with more folks, predominantly Black queer folks, but other folks as well, who are engaging in kind of remaking their lives, or who have themselves decided to kind of take back their own life and their own story and remake it in their own way. I'm also going to talk to folks who have lived through some things, because we need archives, y'all. We need templates, and we learn through others' experiences. We learn through their stories. But if we don't collect the stories, if we don't hear the stories, then how do we learn? How do we grow? How do we understand that there's always been different ways we've done things? We just have to remember. So remembering and memory is really important right now for future making and taking, because if we realize that we can't go back in time, but the past gives us templates and lets us know that at one time it was possible, well then goddamn, it can be possible again. We just can't do new shit in the old ways. So what happens if we learn other ways people did things, really then grounded in our own sense of self, went through our experiences, and then figured out, okay, if X, Y, and Z, we kept doing X, Y, and Z and it really didn't work, what would it look like if I allowed myself to just pivot and say, fuck it, let's do A, B, and C? Because as I said in one of my TikToks, when the only thing possible becomes absolutely impossible, then that lets you know that possibilities now have opened up, because now the impossible can become possible. And this to me is really what I have learned over the past few months this year, as I sit right in this Uranus opposition, as I'm sitting at my own crossroad. I'm having to get very clear about the type of relationships I want to be in, the type of partner that I want to have, the type of partner that I want to be and show up as. I'm having to sit in my decisions, and not just give up people pleasing, but having to let go of this idea that it is my responsibility to make the space comfortable for everybody else. And I didn't realize how much I had been trained to do that in my role in higher ed, and through the disciplining that happens in these academic streets, like any other industry. When you are a feminized body, a Black feminized body in a plantation system, you then become the embodiment of other people's comfort at your own expense. Let's be real, Black women, Black queer folks. How many of us have been made to feel, or have subconsciously kind of taken on ourselves this kind of cloak that it is our responsibility to fix a space? But why are we fixing spaces that don't want to be fucking fixed? But they need us in that space because we have been trained through the identification as a Black woman, Black queer person, that becomes the role, that becomes the script that we fulfill in order to be quote unquote successful in that space. Well, if we say fuck all of that because that don't work for us, that doesn't work for me, it's actually taking away from me, right? Then what do we actually create? Where do we go, and who do we want to be with? And that's really where I am right now, because I got to pay my bills like we all got to do, right? But I can't pay my bills if I'm also dying inside and still can't get my bills paid, because I'm not being paid by institutions who want to take my shit but don't actually want to do the net 15 or net 30, right? So there's all kinds of ways that I'm learning in these crossroads in this Uranus opposition that I have a lot more ability to determine the roads I go down, but I got to get clear and make decisions about the roads I want to go down. And if I don't want to be beholden to institutions anymore the ways that I used to, if the anxiety and the sexism and the racism and the homophobia is something that I am tired of having to constantly navigate in order to get my foot in the door, to then be lowballed when I know that they have already paid another consultant with less experience, less background, twice my pay, then I have to ask myself, why am I trying to be knocked down doors that I know are going to always put up walls? So this is faith, y'all. This is fucking faith. And I'm not going to lie. It doesn't mean I'm not scared shitless sometimes, but I'm more scared to stay where I was and go through those kind of emotions again and physical ailments again. So the crossroads also will have you face your fear. You got to literally sit with that motherfucker, right? And then ask yourself, what are you more afraid of? What you knew because you already know what that life is, or what you don't know, but your dreams are telling you this shit still got to be better than what was. So that's my lessons I've learned this season, y'all, at the crossroads. And I'm still in the midst of this Uranus opposition. It's going to be going on for a few more months. Pluto's still going to be hanging out on my south node for a minute, transiting, right? Because I'm at a 0, 1 degree Aquarius. And the transiting south node is going to be chilling on my personal planets in the 12th house. So the rest of this year for me really is, what does it mean to take your dreams and bring them into reality? And the only way I can do that is if I'm okay sitting in the energy of disruption. So can I be okay disrupting my life for myself so that I can learn how to live? All right, y'all. That's all I got this season. Okay. Please go ahead and subscribe and so you can be notified when the season 3 does drop. And again, I'm talking about stories that center the margins next season. And so I'll have different guests on. I'll be doing my own storytelling and experimenting with a couple of different segments that I'm not going to lie, I'm really excited about. So stay tuned for some new formats, some new experimentations. And also, please subscribe to my Patreon as well for updates of new events that I'll be also dropping this summer into the fall. You can start off at free. There's free tiers all the way up to $100. So there is definitely a span of options for folks based upon what they can and cannot give each month. But I will be doing some online sessions open for folks for pay. So please just check out my Patreon and follow me on my social medias platforms. And also you can subscribe to my newsletter on my website. Those are different ways you can know about new events that are going to be coming up soon. All right. As well as my YouTube as well. So I'll keep you posted. I will be back in the fall, and let me know what you think, y'all, below. Like I said, this episode, I've tried to do this a few different times recording, and I just feel like I'm kind of a flow of consciousness right now. But this has been a space that I've really enjoyed. I started this podcast a year ago now, and the new moon in Cancer is when I dropped it. And the new moon in Cancer is just passed. I'm recording this on the morning of July 6th. This is when I'll also post it. And so it really does, to me, show a moon cycle, like a full 12-month moon cycle, because Cancer is nurturing, Cancer is the mother, Cancer is the emotional body. And I started the first episode talking about my relationship to the water and what Yemaya, the Orisha of the waters, right, was able to essentially give to me once I surrendered to her. So as this new moon in Cancer comes back around and I end season 2, I say to you all, please don't give up on your dreams. I don't mean that in some kind of flippant way. I mean that really directly. Don't give up on your dreams. You never know what they're going to happen. So I think we have to give up on believing that we know how our dreams will act out, how they will be enacted. If we can let go of that and just allow ourselves the ability to visualize, to dream, and then start to trust in the kind of flow of the energies around us, whether it be yourself, your ancestors, nature, whatever you believe in, that is when quote unquote miracles can happen. But those miracles, again, aren't some kind of Harry Potter magical potion. The miracle is that you realize just how magical it is to be human and how we have not been human for a very long time. So dream so that you can really find your humanity. All right. Let me know what you think in whatever platform you are hearing this before. And as always, keep dreaming, keep exploring, because it is through our dreamscapes that we can imagine new futures in the present and actually live. All right, y'all. Till next time.